I think one thing is, as a statistician, I've been trying to change the language along with a few other statisticians around the word significance. It has a very technical meaning when you say statistically significant, but in my assessment and others like me, it's led to things like the replication crisis or reproducibility crisis because people are chasing these p-values, and that comes from conflating the word significant, as in it's statistically significant, with the general meaning of significant, meaning important or meaningful. They have nothing to do with each other. You could hear a little fire in the voice right there. But part of it is also realizing it's on us, my profession of statistics, to take responsibility for shaping that language. We're not known as the best communicators, so that's part of the challenge.
Hey friends, welcome to Public Health Careers. I'm Omari Richens, founder of the Public Health Millennial and host of Public Health Careers. Join us as we dive deep into public health topics and career journeys. You'll hear diverse career stories, absorb professional development and career strategies to help you learn, navigate, and transform your public health journey. On today's episode, we have Dr. Eric J. Daza, DrPH, MPS. Eric is founder and chief editor of Stats of One, as well as principal consultant at the Discerning Statistician. He has been a health data scientist for over 2 decades. He helps you use your own data to learn about yourself, a statistical population of one, and which of your habits are worth changing. He earned a Bachelor's of Arts in Neurobiology and Animal Behavior with a minor in Cognitive Studies at Cornell University, then a Master of Professional Studies in Applied Statistics at Cornell University, and later a Doctor of Public Health in Biostatistics at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and completed a postdoctoral fellowship at the Stanford Prevention Research Center at Stanford University School of Medicine. In today's episode, you'll learn and hear more about how a data scientist and biostatistician merged his experience with public health education, why language and stats can significantly impact understanding and communication of health information, and we dive into a little about p-value and statistical significance, what is the concept of N of 1 studies, and why the use of these personalized health interventions can have tremendous impact in public health, how we realize that grades are not the only measure of success in education and why you should too, how contract roles can lead to full-time opportunities, and much, much more. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and enjoy today's episode.
Hey, this is Eric J. Daza. I am a biostatistician and health data scientist, and you are listening to Public Health Careers.
Thank you, Eric. Welcome to the show. I definitely think that's probably the most professional podcast sounded intro to the show, especially the welcome to Public Health Careers. So, I can tell that you have a little bit of a podcast from that. That was good. Yeah. Bonus points. But super excited to have you here today and to learn more about your story and gain some insights throughout your journey. So just to start things off, how do you identify and tell us a little about your personal background?
Sure. So this is a good question. It's kind of shifted over the years, which is apparent if you Google me and find my rantings and writings and stuff. But I identify as a person of color, first 1.5 gen immigrant, and also somebody who's very privileged. So I'm upper middle class. That's how I grew up most of my life. And professionally, as I mentioned, biostatistician and data scientist. The statistician part of me is very strong. I have to kind of mitigate it from time to time. But yeah, so that's how I identify. He, him, his pronouns. I'm Filipino, and in Tagalog, we just say siya or siya, and it's gender neutral. And this is kind of helps to explain why, if you have any Filipino friends from the Philippines, especially older folks, they might confuse him and her, because for us it's the same word. What else? So that's how I identify. I grew up mostly in California, so there's I guess a strong West Coast flavor there, but I actually grew up half on the East Coast and in the South, in North Carolina. So I spent about half my time in upstate New York and in North Carolina. So really, I'm fairly bi-coastal. So that's kind of like where I call home, those 3 areas. And what else? I'll stop there. I've been talking for a while. So
No, that's perfect, and definitely appreciate the bi-coastal nature, and would be interested to hear like how that has played a part in your like decisions or like how you've navigated that, because I don't think it's something as common maybe as it is, or maybe it is common, but anyway, we'll get into that a little bit later on. You said that you were ranting on the internet about different articles. What kind of stuff do you rant about online, or used to rant about?
Well, like I think one thing is, as a statistician, I've been trying to change the language along with a few other statisticians around the word significance. It has a very technical meaning when you say statistically significant, but in my assessment and others like me, it's led to things like the replication crisis or reproducibility crisis because people are chasing these p-values, and that comes from conflating the word significant, as in it's statistically significant, with the general meaning of significant, meaning important or meaningful. They have nothing to do with each other. You could hear a little fire in the voice right there. But part of it is also realizing it's on us, my profession of statistics, to take responsibility for shaping that language. We're not known as the best communicators, so that's part of the challenge. That's you'll find that that's one of my big pushes to change that language. Because think about it, if you read an article, I ask people substitute the word discernible every time you see the word significant. That's probably closer to what the authors mean. And so, as an example, you can have two numbers that are very close together, but if you have enough people in your study, you'll be able to tell them apart. So they're discernible. But is that difference in income and blood pressure, whatever it is, does it really matter from a policy or health perspective? So you're chasing a marker of how good the evidence is, rather than how impactful is that finding for making a decision. And that's the problem with the word significance. Anyways, I'll stop. That's one of the rants and things.
No, I'm happy I asked that. I'm happy you mentioned that, because this is interesting to me, and I think it is, to your point. It's like significant versus statistically significant, and I can even imagine, because I'm thinking like layperson here, when they are seeing these journal articles and trying to read information and trying to like really understand stuff. How does that really come off on them, and how does that like change the communication that they have with the people in their community, and what impact does that have? And I think it goes back to like how important language is, even as a biostatistician, knowing how language is important, in, to your point, like knowing the impact of the data as opposed to not so much. Okay,
Yep,
awesome.
exactly.
And then behind you, you have a very nice cushion. I don't know if people are going to see it on the video recording, but you have a very nice cushion that said stats of 1. So tell us more about N of 1 studies.
Sure. So your audience is most likely familiar with something called a randomized controlled trial, or RCT, or even just a study on if it's COVID, if it's maternal and child health, infectious disease, mortality, seatbelt use, studies in public health. All of those designs are trying to, in essence, find what average patterns exist. What is, if you look at across a bunch of people, what are the relationships you see on average? And so they look across people, and they're useful for answering questions like, oh, if we were to institute a policy, how would that shift the maybe the poverty level or the access to resources in this particular community for like on average? And that means, like, if we were to institute it, does it actually help raise income if you looked over a bunch of people? So it's a good design. It's a great design for those kinds of questions. And we've been using it in biomedicine as well to find drugs, therapies, interventions that work on average across groups of people. But in medicine and health, really what we're after is, that's great, what works for me? what works the best for me. And historically, we haven't had the data to ask and answer that question in a meaningful way, because you'd have to collect a lot of data on yourself. Okay, so switch your mind from a group of people in a data set, it would look like rows like this, into just one person like this, measured in multiple times throughout their life, a person's history. We can ask the same question, but now the question is, on average for you, if you, maybe it's not a policy, maybe it's an exercise routine or a daily habit. If you do this, on average, does that tend to improve your sleep or reduce your stress levels? Does it help with controlling your glucose, your blood glucose? So that's what an N of 1 study is. And an N of 1 trial is the analog to an RCT. An RCT is a group-based study where you randomize or assign a treatment to two groups of people, usually 2 or more. And you want to see in this group, how does the treatment affect the outcome versus the other group. In an N of 1 trial, you do the same thing, but you're randomizing yourself. So you're doing a self-experiment, and you're testing yourself under condition A or condition B to see if there's a difference in whatever your outcome is, stress, migraines, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what an N of 1 study and an N of 1 trial is.
And how did you get to doing this and like talking more about this and this being something that's important for you?
Yeah, I actually recently wrote a short story about my journey to where I am now with all this work. So I was in grad school after working for a while in a biostatistics role in a pharma company. Decided to go back to school for my doctorate, and I really wanted to work on this area called causal inference. 20 some years ago, most people wouldn't have heard of it, but now it's a big hot topic. It's a hot topic in machine learning and AI, as well as in statistics, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, I was getting ready to graduate, and I wasn't able to do my dissertation on a causal inference method just because we didn't have a large enough sample to develop that particular method. So I did it on something else, but I still wanted to do something impactful with causal inference. So at the end of grad school, we had a set of keynote talks given by Professor Susan Murphy. And Professor Murphy does a lot of amazing, brilliant work on personalization, how to personalize treatment plans. So in all of that, she mentioned something called N of 1 trials. They're not the same thing, but they're very related. And it was also, it gave me hope because Susan is fantastic. She's a phenom and just mathematically brilliant. And I was completely intimidated, like, oh my God, I can't do any of this. But I want to, be involved. N of 1 trials were not very developed in a causal inference way. So I realized I'm comfortable teaching causal inference, the basics. And this area doesn't even really have the structure around it with those basics. So that's how I got into N of 1s intellectually. And then on a personal note, somebody really close to me had an idiosyncratic chronic illness called irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS. That is the kind of condition that's that can be really helped by an N of 1 design, because the triggers they're fairly well known, but they're different from person to person, and their effects are different from person to person. So if you were to do an RCT on a trigger for GI distress, you might even find that on average, the trigger helps half the people and hurts half the people. So guess what? Your average effect is 0. And you would conclude in your paper that this trigger has no effect on average, when in fact it has very serious recurring effects for each person, just in opposite ways. So those are the 2 big reasons I got into it. There's a third one that launched the newsletter, but those are the 2 for getting into N of 1.
Awesome, and definitely share that story of how you've gotten to here. I would definitely put that in the show notes for people to check out as well. But that's fascinating, and I think it is where we are going with personalized medicine, with everyone with Apple Watches or some sort of like a Whoop or Fitbit, like just collecting our own data and knowing more about ourselves. And I can imagine how AI is probably going to help and revolutionize a lot of this N of one. So definitely looking forward to seeing how all of that unfolds for you as well. So as we will get into it a little bit, you've had many roles in biostats and data science. What are some of the pieces of advice that you give to somebody early in their career interested in biostats or data science?
Yes, this is a great question. I do some mentoring on the side and professional development work. Excuse me. And my takeaway from working with mentees who are also mentors. So it's important to realize that, at least for me, a really good mentoring relationship is bidirectional. I'm also learning from my mentee. None of us knows everything. We need to, it's good to keep open for practical reasons, but also just to connect with folks. And so I think some of the advice would be, if you are interested, talk to people who are in those professions. Basically, gather data and do your best to try to find folks in one, like in one role or a different role, the roles that you think you're interested in. Talk to those people because you'll only get so much from the job descriptions or what's out on the internet. There's some fantastic resources, but it's really good to talk to somebody to get their story. Their story will sink in and help you understand like what that day-to-day work is like. Because they can be very different and very similar depending on the role, so basically talk to people.
Yeah, absolutely nuanced in leading roles in public health, and there's so much that you can do, and so many ways that you can take a public health degree and apply it in the working field. So definitely have those conversations, LinkedIn stalk people, and build those relationships as well. Are there any in biostats and data science, any like languages, programs that you recommend people get experience with?
Yes, so I grew up in SAS. I was born into SAS. That's the de facto language in pharmaceuticals and biotech. At least it was at the time. And I then learned R when I was in grad school. That is the de facto language for statisticians and biostatisticians. And then I've since done a little more Python and SQL, SQL. So those four are the biggest ones in my mind. I would also, if you're going more the academic route, you could pick up Stata or Stata. Small plug there. My second dissertation paper was a Stata command. Full disclosure, I do not use Stata anymore. It was for that paper, and it's also used in different areas from the ones I'm usually in. So not typically biostats or data science. So I would say, yeah, R, Python, and SQL are the musts. And if you go into biostats specifically, which is essentially like the shortcut for biostats is statisticians who are also in pharma and who know regulatory stuff. Then I'd also put in SAS. Definitely put in SAS there.
Take that advice, y'all. So before we shift more into your journey and your beginning into public health and your biostats work, would love to know, what does public health mean to you?
Oh my gosh. So when I applied to doctoral programs, I didn't know that public health was a thing. I was coming at it with a master's in applied stats, working in a pharma company, looking for doctoral programs in statistics or biostatistics. And that was my formal intro to the field of public health. And since then, it's become a very deep part of my persona. To me, maybe this is encouraging, especially coming from a biostatistician. Typically, we're not thought of as like core public health. We're the methods people, who help the public health people. But my degree is actually a doctor of public health, and you're not obligated to have that mean anything for you with public health in particular, but I do. So I can tell you what it means by the things I've done, for example. So while I don't, work with health departments or anything directly public health like that, or work with initiatives within my own field of statistics, I have been volunteering with the DEI group at the American Statistical Association to the point where I now have had a few leadership roles. And so there, it's very much a public health flavor of statistics where we're focusing on the gaps in even just methods for addressing the gaps in the world that have to do with access, that have to do with lack of representation in the data set, that have to do with the biases that come up with models that maybe aren't appropriate or ones that aren't being used. So for me, I guess, now that I'm talking through it, the TLDR of public health for me is the ASA's group on DEI, otherwise known as JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion. So we have our logo and mugs. See, there it is, JEDI.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, thank you for sharing that, and would be interesting to see. Well, I will ask you a question later on when we get to the DrPH. But starting off, you got your bachelor's in arts in neurobiology and animal behavior cognitive studies at Cornell University. Walk us through that thought process.
Yes, so I am a 1.5 generation brown Asian immigrant, middle class, upper middle class, and so I had that stereotypical immigrant / Asian immigrant upbringing of you're going to be a lawyer or an engineer or a doctor, something nice and practical and stable, makes money. We're going to move to this new country and set you up for success. And so biology was the closest thing to me in the pre-med part of my life to that, to being like pre-med. My parents they're awesome. They've really supported me through everything, as has my grandma and my sister. And they just set me off in this direction because it was a practical direction to go. So they encouraged me to think about medicine. And that very quickly for me translated into biology. I was interested in consciousness and neurobiology. I still am. During my time in undergrad, I got massively involved in student theater. So I'm also a musician. I play classical piano and electric bass. Never done theater before. I got way deep into it. So there's this opposite trend, negative correlation. My grades went like this as my theater involvement went like this. And towards the end of my undergrad, I was, to be honest, like feeling a little dejected, a lot dejected and desperate for a path forward because I kind of felt like I'd squandered my educational opportunities on the biology parts. Still, I loved it, but I couldn't focus. I couldn't really hone those skills. At the end of undergrad, I took a few cognitive studies courses, and one of them had a lab component, and it was cognitive studies. And in that time span, I had to design my own experiment, run it on my fellow students, and analyze the data. And that's where it occurred to me, oh, I kind of like this. I kind of like data analysis and designing this experiment, yada, yada. So a serendipitous thing happened. Cornell started a brand new 1-year master's of applied statistics around the same time. So that I thought was my ticket out, my way to claw my way into a steady job of some sort. So my story, when I used to tell this story, I tell people, oh, I fell in love with statistics in this course. And I realized now that's only half the story. Half of it was desperation and emotional and mental health challenges of, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with my life. What do I do to be productive? And then there's this big chip on my shoulder being an immigrant, like, don't be mediocre. We moved to, it's self-imposed. My parents weren't saying that at all. So that's how I got into the next part, which is the master's. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to tell that full story because you never know who else is going through that exact same situation. And just hearing you share that from where you are now and how helpful and inspirational that can be. So I'm glad that you're able to share that and maybe reflecting a little bit more on undergrad. Were there any like big takeaways that you have?
From undergrad, I think, well, yes. So the biggest one was I learned that, grades aren't everything. I got an academic probation letter in my second year, and that was the lowest I had ever gone academically. And I think it's important, from my experience in the world, it's important for like Asian kids and Asian immigrants in particular to hear. Immigrant kids in general, but for my experience, I'm most familiar with the Asian part of the immigrant sphere because those pressures can feel so intense that they lead to thoughts of suicide and just really dark places. And I was fortunate in retrospect. I did not suffer from any diagnosed depression or anxiety to any good degree, at least. And so I was fortunate and protected by a very loving family and friends. And so the big takeaway, was this metric of getting A's. It's not the end of the world if you get a D and almost fail out, right? It was very satisfying to be able to go one step at a time, back up out of that and realize, oh, yeah, life is full of like wonderful things. I don't have to hang my hat on this. And then as we talk, you'll see later that I'm pretty sure that played into me going back to school. Like, well, whatever. It's kind of like life is what you make it. Once your foundation is taken away, it's a very Zen process. When your foundations are taken away, if you are able to be supported, you start to realize everything's kind of made up, and I can make my own path with help, right? So.
Absolutely, absolutely. Definitely think we can all make our own path, and everyone is figuring it out, and no one has everything figured out, and we're all just trying to do our best, and which is important. Okay, so you were struggling in your bachelor's program. You took this class. You're like, oh, I really like this type of work. Then thankfully Cornell started this 1-year master's program. So you got this Master of Professional Studies in Applied Statistics at Cornell. What did you get from that time in that 1-year program?
Oh my gosh, yes. So this was sort of me redeeming myself, this going through this program. It was 1 year long, but I had to prepare to get into the program for the entire year beforehand. The big takeaway for me is it really helped build up my sense of purpose and accomplishment again. I was able to complete this program, and that told me, oh, look, I'm not such a screw up. I'm able to complete this master's, and now I have like 2 degrees from this place. Not only that, it is one of the hardest, if not academically, intellectually, the hardest subject I have ever come across, or I had at the time. I think that's important for your listeners to know, because my story isn't the kind of story where you think, or I say like, oh yeah, I was really naturally, talented at statistics and that. No. It's the opposite. Very hard for me. And so it captivated me, the difficulty of it, because I was just able to focus on it and obsess. And then every little, like textbook exercise, everything like that felt really good. It was like a win. Now I would discover just last year, actually, that there's a reason for that. And the reason is that I have ADHD. And that explains a lot of my struggles in undergrad. It also helps explain why a field that's so hard was so attractive to me. I've talked to enough friends and colleagues with diagnosed ADHD now to understand that's a not uncommon story. You'll find something that really captivates you and keeps your attention and your focus for a long time. And here I am now with a newsletter. So
Yeah, but that is important, and we all start as beginners in work, and things are challenging, but as we learn them and as we do them, they get easier and we become more experienced and proficient, and we're able to speak from these places of expertise. So it definitely is a journey. So believe in yourself and you'll make it there one time. And so you're graduating. Walk us through the okay. So after you graduated, you had a SAS programmer role and statistician at Astex Pharmaceuticals. But before even getting this role, going into this program, what are you thinking? Like you'll come out working during this time. What was the thought process there? And then walk us through going into that role.
Oh, I love that question. It's such a great professional development question. Why did you do this? What were you thinking, right? I entered the program because I wanted to find a job that would pay me a high enough salary to pay back my student loans. A big concern for many, many people. And I realized at the end of undergrad, if I graduate with a bachelor's in neurobiology, the jobs I would get wouldn't be sufficient for me to pay back those loans. This master's program almost doubled my starting salary, and they advertised it at the beginning of the program. And so there was a good financial incentive to do it. That paired with my growing interest in statistics and my desperation to not be mediocre all came together to enroll in this program. Another piece is life will occasionally throw you some nice opportunities. My grades really sucked in undergrad, but I felt like this is a new program that they're starting. They're going to want to fill it up with competent people, but they're looking to fill seats at the start. So maybe the barrier for entry isn't as high. So there was an opportunity there. So that's another takeaway: is pay attention to the opportunities around you, even if they pull you in a direction you weren't anticipating. That's been another theme of my professional career. So
yeah, absolutely agree with that, and that's awesome that you're also intentional in thinking through. Okay, well, my biology degree isn't really gonna get me where I want to be. So what are ways that I can do that? And then to find a 1-year program that I think like sets you up to do that is really awesome. So like kudos on you, despite however that will happen. That was awesome. So then you walked into this first role after your master's program as a SAS programmer and biostatistician. So tell us about what you did there.
yes, so back in the day, and at this point, this is 20 years ago. Whew, say that. The roles that you had as biostatisticians with either a bachelor's or master's degree essentially were statistical programming roles. You help, in my case, my boss had a PhD in biostats. So he was writing the statistical analysis plan, editing protocols for clinical trials, and making those more executive decisions, which is good because he had the training. My job was to support him with writing the code to do a lot of the analyses, documenting that code, keeping it copacetic with regards to FDA, making sure it met the regulations that we had to follow. So a lot of data programming and statistical programming also of the deliverables. So a lot of learning on that side of things.
And then after this role, he decided to pursue a Doctor of Public Health in Biostats at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So walk us through that thought process, maybe even walk us through why not a PhD, especially considering that your boss at that time had a PhD. So yeah, I'd love to hear more about your thought process there.
Yes, this one's a fun one. So I guess a lot of them in my head are fun ones. So after 2 or 3 years, I guess after 2 years of working in this role, which I spent 5 years in, after the first 2 years, I realized I really wanted to learn more about the underlying concepts, the statistical concepts, and I wasn't as interested in growing a career as a statistical programmer. And they're excellent, wonderful careers along that path. But I just was more curious about the statistics themselves, like those fundamental concepts, the theories. And, like, why do I use a t-test here? It wasn't enough for me to just use it or follow a rule book. So that was the spark that got me wanting to go back. And I actually applied to 10, 12 or so schools in 2000. When was that? 4, 5, 3 years in, so 2005. They all rejected me, but that's what I expected based on my academic record. One of those schools, UNC Chapel Hill, was awesome. They flew a bunch of us out to Chapel Hill before they made their decisions, because they wanted us to, basically have like a little camp or crash course into what the department is like, what public health is like, et cetera, et cetera. While I was there, the undergraduate admissions director, Suchi Chiriyashi-Chindran, rest in peace, wonderful man. He was just very warm, and he told me what I needed to know. He said, look, in so many words, like, so your grades suck, yes, but you need to be more competitive, but we love your work experience, and we want that in our program. And so here's basically a prescription. Take a few of these intermediate advanced courses in math and stats, and then reapply, and that will make you more competitive. Side note, I found out earlier this year through Suchi's obituary that this was no accident. He spent his entire career helping students who really wanted to be in these programs. And so it was just a wonderful thing, like, to have somebody pursue that and then help you, and it makes you want to pass it on. So anyways, okay, so cut long story short, I took some courses. My workplace was very generous, letting me go to class in the middle of the day to take like one class a semester at UC Berkeley, which was nearby. And that's, in fact, how I got into causal inference, because one of the people I met was a big pioneer, thought leader in causal inference. I had no idea that he was, or that even what causal inference was, Anyways, did that, reapplied, and I only focused on 3 schools. And the second time around, UNC Chapel Hill accepted me, and that's how I got in. The last part of this story that's kind of fun is I got the letter, my acceptance letter, and I had applied to the PhD program. So this is answering your question. And I freaked out a little bit because I saw it and it said, congratulations, you've been accepted to the DrPH program. That's cool. And I thought, oh no, did they make a mistake? And did they accidentally not accept me? But, turns out I had checked a box on the application form that said, if you feel I am better suited to another program, go ahead and put me in that program. And that was the DrPH program for biostats. Very rare. You don't usually see that. In fact, UNC no longer has a DrPH program for biostats. But the basic breakdown is it's the more applied consulting side, professional side, versus the PhD, which is more academic focused.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that journey and that thought process. And I think it's important to note, like, all those little points, like being able to go to Berkeley and take these courses and learn about causal inferences. Like, these are just things that you don't see it, but when you're looking back on it, just how important and pivotal they are to the things that you find important and how you do your work and the time that you spend in the workforce. So that's really, really cool to hear. And that's also very dope to hear that the person at UNC Chapel Hill would help and support people that really wanted to get into the program, but maybe didn't have everything there. Because oftentimes it might just be them sharing that little bit of advice that really gets you over that edge and gets you out of your head to say, okay, these are the things that I need to do. Because, some of us can be our biggest doubters in our head. So, like, just really hearing that from someone and someone sharing a way to move forward, I think is always a good thing.
Yes, your listeners should listen up. Don't take those nuggets whenever they come your way, even if it sounds like boilerplate language. They still made the choice to put that boilerplate language in there because they saw something in you. So
you said you went earlier on. You said that you're a statistician. You had no idea about public health, and then you kind of explain how public health became important to you, or how it's impacted, and so would love to learn more about that discovery. And I'd imagine that it came throughout this DrPH program. So tell us more about that.
yes, I'll try to summarize this. I actually wrote an essay that answers this question essentially in LAist, the magazine, and oh gosh, what's the name of that? Oh yes, the title is Secret Asian Man, something like that. I can't even remember the title of my own essay, but the basic gist is I came to North Carolina, and so let me back up. When I moved to the U.S., I didn't realize at the time how much I was trying to fit in, trying to assimilate, mix in. And part of that was in California. I identified as liberal leaning, whatever you want to call it. And it was a very naive idea of liberalism. The big example is race and racism. I was under the impression that talking about race and racism was a bad thing because then it would bring up that topic that we're trying to squash. Like, I just didn't really think about it. I realized in retrospect, it's because I was never really strongly racially challenged. And so I never had that experience to realize, oh no, it's still around. Hello, we need to do something about it. So when I moved to North Carolina, sorry, I keep getting ahead of myself. When I moved to college in upstate New York, that's when I first started having those experiences of being an outsider, because there weren't that many Filipinos there. People didn't know. And anyways, your listeners can read about it in the essay. Don't want to keep going. But a number of times my identity was challenged, and that's started, it sort of started my awakening into these issues and being more aware of the system-wide issues that are causing all of these experiences, right? So cut back to the Bay Area after college, moved back to California, and I've had those experiences. And then I continue to have them with other friends, friends who are white, who don't realize they're saying something that's a microaggression. As I'm doing this, I'm realizing other axes of influence and power. Me as a male, oh my gosh, there's things that I've said to women or people who present as women. I didn't realize or necessarily acknowledge as that needs to change. That was a bad thing. So all these things are happening, and then I moved to North Carolina, where there's no Filipinos. So that's where, at least on a racial ethnic axis, I started becoming aware of those experiences as somebody who's not well known about in a given area. And that paired really well with my academic work in public health, because we talk about systems of inequity a lot. And there are also very nerdy causal inference aspects to that whole world. So that's how I developed this deep appreciation of public health and just DEI efforts and the need for that kind of work in general, through direct experience paired with formal studies, at the same time, right?
Yeah, well, that is fascinating, and I think it is insightful, because depending on who you are, you don't think about these things, and I think and to your point, it's not talking about something doesn't mean it's not there, doesn't mean it's not impacting people. I think talking about it is the important thing, so that we can have that conversation and we can move things forward. So, and I imagine that that's the case for a lot of people when they find out about public health and about systemic inequities and these types of things. It just opens up your eyes to a whole new world and viewing things. I don't know where I'm going with this, but let's get back. Let's get back to your DrPH. So you're in your DrPH, you have a graduate research assistant at Roe Incorporated, and then you also have a position as a research assistant and a graduate research assistant at UNC Chapel Hill. Walk us through maybe a little bit about those experiences.
Yes. During your program, your doctoral program, I forget, probably master's programs too, you can, as a form of financial aid, you can work in a research assistantship. And I believe this tells you how bad I am with finances. But the idea is like a grant will pay your salary. And then you also get to put it on your resume or your CV, your curriculum vitae, for the work that you've done. So ROE is what's known as a CRO, sometimes called a CRO, a contract research organization or clinical research organization. It's a very common type of company in pharma and biotech. Essentially, if you have a drug or intervention you want to test, or you want to run a study to survey patients, providers, people out there, and you don't have the resources in your company to do it, you go to a CRO who will help you do anything from designing the study to running the analysis to managing the data, everything under that umbrella. So that's what CROs do, and that's what ROE did. So that position was a very natural fit from my previous role. I was doing the same kind of work. It's just that before I was at one pharma company, whereas a CRO is a service provider to many different companies. Yeah. Okay, so that was that position. I then switched into a survey sampling role, actually, at UNC. It's like when you look through this timeline, once you realize I have ADHD, it's like, yes, it makes perfect sense. It's not one thing. So survey sampling, I love that experience. It's not my main line of interest, but it was just fun to work on something very different. The funny timing today, Omari, is I just talked to a new colleague this morning, and they were talking to me about surveys. So I brought out this report that I wrote for that group at Chapel Hill. For 1 year, I was put in charge of a project we had with the North Carolina Department of Transportation to do a survey project with them. And I was put in charge. I'm very proud of this report. Hopefully they still use it. But I told my colleague this morning, yo, this is like the first time in 10, 15 years or more that I've shown this to somebody. So nobody's like, hey man, show me your survey sample report. Sweet, I got it right here. Yeah. So anyways, now twice in one day. In statistics, I think that's a Dirichlet process, something like that. Anyways. Okay, so that was that really fun side project. Part of the reason that I got interested was the person I'd mentioned before, this fella, Suchi, who was the graduate admissions director. I learned some survey stuff from him. He taught demographics, so not directly, but I think that was probably my connection to it. Cut to my last role at UNC. It was with the Carolina Population Center, and I was in that role for the rest of my time. And so there, I worked on an international study based out of Malawi. It was a study on maternal and child health. The study that I worked on was a sub-study of the big one. The main study was looking at the impact of dietary supplements on infants, on newborns, and to see if like one supplement helped them grow faster than the other, or helped them grow more than the other supplement. It was also paired with another intervention. It was like a 2x2 type intervention. But the main endpoints had to do with preventing HIV infection from the mother to the child and looking at how well the child grows. So anyways, that on a very self-serving note, that study was the data set I worked with for my dissertation. So that's how I got involved with it. Little did I know that through that work, I would meet the person who is now my wonderful spouse.
Hey.
So there you go. Yeah. So that's the work I did there. So those are my 3 roles at UNC Chapel Hill: pharma, biotech, survey, design and sampling, and public health, RCT intervention, global health. Yeah.
Well, thank you for showing me your report, your survey development report. It was appreciated. I definitely think it is a great day when you're able to show that twice to people, and I think you said a decade or so. So I will take that. I will take that.
It's statistically significant. That it fulfills that criterion. Yeah.
It absolutely does. Absolutely. But I also like the part of, like, you're doing this work, but you're also piquing your interest and doing things that pique your interest and mightn't be directly related to what you're doing. And from that, you never know what comes from it, the data for your dissertation, etc. So were there any takeaways from your DrPH program?
Let's see. It was just such a fun. It was just like, I mean, I was gonna say it was such a fun time in my life, and I mean fun in a very broad way, as in high highs, low lows, like some of the lowest lows of my life and the highest highs. The biggest takeaway is actually that my I don't know if it was my prediction was fulfilled, but I have appreciated going somewhere completely different to unearth those implicit assumptions that you're making. And this was a big lesson in that. I knew some of that going in, but then, going through the program, I learned big lessons about, race and gender dynamics that I didn't realize I was making certain assumptions about. I helped other people realize assumptions they made about people from the groups I identify with. So for me, the biggest takeaway is, it's like go somewhere else and do something different, hang out with completely different people for some time, make connections, especially now when the environment seems very polarized. Those connections are what will get us back to moving forward rather than pushing each other apart. I did that there. I made a number of friends through a martial arts class. I was in North Carolina around, when was that, 2015? 2015 is when I left. But there was a lot of upheaval at the time in the news. And so I was there experiencing that and meeting people also who were like more conservative and libertarian, and just kind of realizing, okay, you're just people, right? Like, I really don't agree with some of the stuff you're thinking or saying, but we all like hanging out and eating at the same, I don't know, barbecue joints or whatever. So those things, like, focus on those in order to then talk about the harder stuff.
Yeah. Cannot agree with you more on that, and I think that is what we definitely need more as a country, just having those conversations with people and seeing their humanity in it. So appreciate you bringing that up. Finished your DrPH and you went into a postdoctoral fellowship in Stanford at the Stanford Prevention Research Center at Stanford University School of Medicine. Tell us about why you want to pursue a postdoctoral fellow and what you gained from this experience.
Because I was afraid of going back to work. It's half joking. I didn't I still wanted to do something with causal inference. I hadn't been able to do that during my doctoral program. And then I mentioned Susan Murphy gave those talks. I got interested in NF1. And so I wanted to pursue that thread and see what I could do. I also wasn't sure where in industry I would want to go back if I did. And so I cold call. This is another point for your listeners and viewers. Don't be afraid to do this. I basically cold emailed, I guess, this person at Stanford, Mike Bioki, who was an assistant professor at the time and around my age, or about the same age, but he was doing causal inference work. And we hit it off really well. And now he's one of my good friends. And he ended up being my postdoc mentor. There was luck involved there too. I reached out to him at a point when it was usually very late, if not too late, to look for postdocs. And another applicant had dropped out, so that spot opened up. And that's why I was able to secure that spot. Now, listeners might be wondering, so that's great, but why that particular center or that institution? I was really nostalgic for the Bay Area. I love North Carolina. It was another place that I learned to call home, and I still do. But I was nostalgic, so I wanted to move back to this area. And so that helps explain why I looked at Stanford. I looked at Berkeley as well, and maybe San Jose State, UCSF. So that's how I found that position. Yeah.
That's awesome. You always have to shoot your shot. The worst that they can tell you is no. The best that they can tell you is that someone drops out and there's a spot for you to join the fellowship.
Exactly. That's how it goes.
Right. And you said you were just diving more into causal inferences in this fellowship.
Yeah, Mike was. So what the thing about being junior faculty, if you're going into academia, usually people say try to find a postdoc with senior faculty because then they have a lot of clout, essentially, just to be frank, right? So then you can have a lot of connections to opportunities. Junior faculty don't have that, but one of the advantages is that, at least in Mike's case, he's super flexible. I was there under a grant for the center, not one of his grants. So I was there to essentially do whatever I wanted within the center's scope. So he was wonderful. He put me in front of key faculty members to make my approaches known and all that. But he was very supportive of my own work in N of 1. And I didn't really have guidance on it. So it was nice to have Mike on faculty being like, yeah, I'll help you out. You'll have to guide yourself because it's not his specialty, but super supportive. And it's the time when I learned about digital health and health behavior change, those different areas that would lead into the next parts of my life. But I won't get into that just yet.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing that, and thank you for making the distinction between senior and junior faculty and how that might affect how your fellowship experience is. After the fellowship, you became a statistical consultant at Clarify Health Solutions, and then you were also a senior statistician in the research and data science department, maybe. So tell us about those roles that you had there.
Yeah, so I was in a postdoc for 3 years. In the first 2 years, I was under what's called a T32 grant from NIH. And if I remember correctly, typically your first 2 years are guaranteed. You'll have funding. But if you want to stay longer, then you'll have to make an argument for it for subsequent years under that grant. You could get a different grant, follow a different postdoc. So during my third year, I was able to secure funding, but I needed to look for a job. And I spent that entire year looking for faculty and industry jobs. So I had worked in industry before. I knew how it was. And that was fine by me, but I'd also wanted to go for some faculty positions. That's what they train you to think about in a doctoral program. So
no comment.
No comment. Yeah. So you could just chalk this up to me being an awkward biostatistician. He doesn't know how to really say stuff. He's not good with the words. So I looked for jobs during that third year. A nice piece of advice or hint for your listeners, your audience is, if you can, it helps to go to networking events where you wear some kind of flair or something that's a conversation starter. Me being someone who presents as male, I can wear hats, which I do. And I had one of my UNC hats on when I attended this meetup group for health tech folks here in the Bay Area. The fella sitting next to me saw my hat and said, "Hey, you went to UNC? Me too." Turns out he had mastered out of a quantitative psychology program there, and also worked at Clarify Health. And so I mentioned that I was looking for jobs, even consulting roles. That's how I started off as a statistician there, consulting. And then after a few months, they ended up interviewing me for a full-time role. And that's how I got that role.
Awesome. Yeah. Go to those network events. And to your point, like, it is, how do you start those conversations? Like, what are those little things that people can pick up on and say, oh, I went to there too? And I think alumni connections are usually some of the tightest connections that you could really find out there, because people are so loyal to their school. Good or bad, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to ask, like, how was it for you transitioning from, because you're on East Coast, West Coast, East Coast, West Coast. How was that for you? Was that difficult or pretty simple?
I think the first time when I moved to upstate New York, that was, trying to remember back, it was challenging, but I also learned that I don't really, I didn't get homesick. So it was eye-opening for me. Like, oh, this is fun. I like being here. It's pretty different though in many ways. And so it wasn't super challenging. I don't know. I'm also a very positive person in general, so I tend to see the glass half full. That's not always advantageous, y'all, because it means that you miss when there's tension and conflict. So check yourself if you're an optimist. Speaking as a 45-year-old optimist, for the most part, I haven't gone through some of that. So yeah, for me, it was just such a wonderful time, experiencing new things, meeting friends, different backgrounds, different parts of the country. I think that helped with moving to North Carolina. I did not anticipate moving to North Carolina, but I didn't think through it. But I'm sure, moving to upstate New York from the West Coast played in. Like, oh, okay. So one of the things is the flora and fauna and the ecology is very different. But between North Carolina and New York, they're relatively similar. And so perhaps some of it felt very, pretty familiar when I moved to North Carolina. And if y'all haven't been to North Carolina, please go visit. You'll love it. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I guess thoughts and prayers go out to Western North Carolina, because they're dealing with some serious devastation right now.
I know. It's just, yes.
Yeah. So your next role was a contract lead biostatistician in digital health outcomes at Evidation, and I think you would then hire into a lead biostatistician role. So tell us about those positions.
Yeah. So actually, I learned about Evidation during my postdoc because they worked in digital health on longitudinal data collected from apps, surveys, sensors, wearables, devices, which was what I got super interested in during my postdoc. So I had met their founding chief data scientist while I was a postdoc at Stanford, and we kept in touch. And actually, the summer before I accepted my full-time role at Clarify, I did contract work both with Clarify and with Evidation. So I got to see how they worked, what kinds of studies they worked on. Clarify, at the start of 2020, so pretty much right around when COVID hit, when the pandemic hit, they laid off a bunch of folks, including me and my team. And I felt bad for senior leadership because, those are decisions that are made ahead of time, but it happened to coincide with the pandemic. So it's like, oh no, we have to let people go at this point when there's like a pandemic starting. This was not a blessing in disguise, but Evidation about a month later opened up a full-time role for a biostatistician. So I got super lucky again. Part of what helps with the luck is I had a lot of people in my network. One of them tagged me in this post for Evidation. And so that's how I started there as a biostatistician. And it was a wonderful role. I love my team, just very collaborative. The kinds of studies we worked on are what I really liked. It was using my biostats experience and training and applying that to digital health studies. So a lot of that involved being a translator or a liaison between software and techie people and biostats pharma people who spoke different languages. So it was a very fun role. One thing for your listeners is I'm trying to think. I started in my roles in industry, I believe at least two of them. My first one at Astex, back then it was called Supergen. Now it's called Taiho. That role and Evidation were both contract roles as a start. But the intention was contract to perm, contract to FTE. So, if you're looking for a job out there, don't dismiss like contract roles because a lot of them can convert into full-time roles.
Absolutely. And currently, you're the principal consultant at the Discerning Statistician, and you're founder and chief editor at Stats of One. So tell us more about these and then what you do in it.
Yeah, the Discerning Statistician, it's just a fun name I came up with in the last maybe year or two for my general consulting work. So it's very ad hoc. I'll just occasionally I'll help out a colleague on the side or a client, but again, it's very ad hoc. The kind of work I do there is I'm careful not to infringe on any IP for any places that I work at. And so the services, when I'm working somewhere else full time, the services I offer are very broad. They're very like generally available. They're not trademarked or copyrighted. And those services are, for example, writing your statistical analysis plan, helping you design your study protocol. Very classic statistician, biostatistician responsibilities. That's pretty much it. And then outside of that, or like within that and outside of it, that involves talking to people and helping them understand statistically what do they need for their project. If they have a platform they're building, what are some things the analysts might like to see? And answer those kinds of questions. And then I can dip into my various experiences at different types of organizations to answer those questions. But largely writing SAPs and helping with study protocols, or like for grants, like writing the statistical section, not doing the analysis part itself. I can do that. I typically don't. That's that role. And oh my gosh, I could go on and on. I'm going to try to not. I'm just going to try to keep it brief with Stats of One, but it's my newsletter. It's my baby. It's my side project. We have a podcast now. Like, click, subscribe, please. And I started it in 2020. So, Omari, this is the third piece of when you asked me how I got into N of ones. Mm-hmm. The first two pieces were intellectual curiosity and a loved one with irritable bowel syndrome. That got me into the field. And then with Stats of One, what happened was in 2020, I was at Clarify at the time, about to be laid off, but did not know it. I wanted to attend this conference and talk about the work that I would have done if I had been faculty. And that work was all N of one statistical methods. So I knew that from working in industry, it helps to have a TLDR like a brand or some really quick, pithy thing. At the same time, again, like early 2020, I was invited to do an Instagram takeover by this small, at the time small but growing group called Pinoy scientists. Pinoy is slang for Filipino. And I did that IG takeover for a week. And essentially, you have to write a blog with photos or videos. So that got me thinking, number one, I'm attending this conference, or I was planning to. Number two, oh shit, I can write a blog. I just did it, right? And number three, I need a home for this academic work. And that's how Stats of One got started. Like, okay, I need to create this now so I can take it to this conference and I'll have it as a brand. That's how it all got started. I ended up within like 2 years adding two wonderful co-editors. And then, 2 years later, we started a podcast. I guess I made enough noise. We've been recognized in Forbes and Fortune magazine. It's one of those lists of like health innovators. But that was really cool because it's a field that I feel strongly, myself and my colleagues feel strongly about, that should be used more now that we have the data to do these types of studies. It also helps with equity and inclusivity because you're tailoring that study around yourself, your particular circumstances in life. Then we can see how these, connect together in groups. So.
Well, that's really beautiful. How the brand company started, and I think that's how it generally is, right? Like you have ideas, and then like just something comes up, and you're like, oh, like I wrote this, I could do this. Where do I create this home for the content that I want to create, and things just go from there. That's really awesome to hear. And I guess one more thing on the N of one is, like, how do we get that to be more widespread and get more people to be using N of one?
Yeah. Well, one is by subscribing to my newsletter.
Link below.
Link below. That's right. That is what we're trying to do at Stats of One. I'd love for folks to share ideas for how to do that. I'm not trained in marketing. Just kind of flailing about. And I know I do it the way I know, which is networking and giving lectures and talks on my own work in N of one, which is not, a very small part of the field. So I would say, connect with me at Stats of One to be able to share your ideas for how to do that. So you've asked the question that I'm asking too, because like from a business perspective, I'd love to know how we can approach this more strategically. There's only so much I can do,
Yeah. Understood. And then before we move you on to the Furious Five, would love to firstly quickly hear a little bit about you're a scientific advisor at Keep AI. So I'd love to hear about that. And then where would you like to see yourself in the future?
Sure. The Keep AI gig is actually with a friend of mine. So I actually haven't really been in touch with them for a few months now. But at the beginning of my unemployment period, I was helping them just ideate around how to test the trust and reliability of LLMs and AI. For me, it was also an opportunity to learn about AI and LLMs. I did not really have that time when I was at Evidation because of the client work. So now this was my chance. So yeah, it's a loose advising role. Just kind of a little bit of input around, oh, this makes sense to test this way, et cetera, et cetera. But for your audience, that's part of consulting. It could be pretty structured or pretty open. It's all up to you for how you want to structure that.
Absolutely. And where would you like to see yourself in the future?
Oh gosh, in the future, I don't know where this path is. I mean, in the near future, somewhere in an FTE role, like a full-time role. So something like that in digital health, ideally, a continuation of my work. But one of the forks is I'd love to work on something more strategy related, something more impact and implementation related. So, connecting the methods from academia with the regulatory bodies like FDA and the companies, because a lot of the methods that get used, they're not like the super fancy methods. They're your bread and butter methods, t-tests, right? Because we know them really well, like, and how they work. And so then the question is like, what makes that happen? How do you get a method to be used like that? There's a lot of relationship building. So that role and the digital health stuff, but I'll continue with it at my newsletter either way. So
Awesome. Well, moving on to the Furious Five, the 5 questions that I ask all guests. Number 1, what advice would you give to a student trying to pursue a career in public health?
Oh, wow. Well, first, it's funny. You think I'd have this top of mind because I do this. I do this a lot. Well, it's usually with students, specifically in like stats, biostats, data science. In public health, kind of like before, talk to different people in public health doing different jobs. That's really it. Really just connecting and hearing their stories, because it's informative. It's good data, because you won't just get the structure of their work, but also the kinds of cultures within public health. How people behave and what habits they have, and what people talk about, what they don't talk about. You'll get that idea from talking to people. You won't get that idea just from reading, a newsletter or taking a course. So talk to people,
Absolutely
which also
agree.
helps with networking. So
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. That was the precursor to this podcast, me just having informational interviews with people online. Pandemic happened, and then I was like, all right, I'm going to start this podcast. And here we are.
yeah,
Here we are. Number
awesome.
2. Yeah. Number 2. If you're talking to someone wanting to get into your position, what advice would you give them?
So, well, I hope you don't want to get into the unemployed position, but if you want to get into something in biostats or data science, I would say, let's see, for these particular areas, you do need a good amount of technical training. If you're going into biostats, there are programs for that are long running. They know how to train you in not just the stats, but also the study designs. One thing that wasn't common for me at the time was regulations. If you're going into biostats specifically, you're going to learn that a lot of what you're relied on is your knowledge of regulations. And the regulations back in the day for me when I started, they seemed just kind of like, all right, I just got to follow this rule, et cetera, et cetera. I now appreciate that regulations ideally they're not meant to be red tape. They're meant to really give a good scientific foundation to the study, because they make the study replicable. So ideally, the regulation should help you document the process so that you can replicate the whole thing with a new set of participants or new data. That's, in my mind, ideally where regulations work. Okay, so that's for biostats. For data science, I did a recent interview on this, actually 2 years ago, and I would say stats is one part of it. I wish I had more computer science training and also business training, as in operations. So anything more formal like that, I would say focus on those if you're headed more towards the data science. And so yeah, with biostats, it's like stats and regulations. And then with data science, it's stats, computer science, and business operations.
Number 3, what's something you're working on improving in your life right now?
I'm working on improving so many things. I would say, prioritization and communication. And what I mean by that is making my communications more concise. One of my favorite managers at Evidation had lots of great advice for me. And one I got constantly, not just from him, but other managers, is when you type something on Slack or WhatsApp or Signal, whatever, Instagram, maybe not Instagram, but these work messaging apps. I know you like to ideate a lot, but think about what you want the person reading it to do with that information. And that is golden advice for me because I naturally ideate and spin off. I have had to develop the skill to be concise. And to do that, it really helps to hear this guidance, which is, what do you want your audience to do with that information? That helps narrow it down. That's one of two. The other thing is prioritization. So again, I was diagnosed with ADHD last year. It was very eye-opening because now I realize that that's why I procrastinate to get work done. It's how I function to meet deadlines. With medications that I'm taking, I can start those things earlier and also be aware of deadlines that are coming up. Now, having said that, I got really far without knowing I had ADHD and all that. Calendars help a lot because they help prioritize. They help you see visually where your deadlines are. But yeah, prioritization and concise communication. Those are two things.
Number 4, professionally, do you recommend anything?
Okay, well, aside from my newsletter and podcast, I do. Let's see. There's a podcast a friend of mine runs called Data and Science with Glenn. I forget if he uses his full name. Glenn Wright Colopy. I can put it in the chatter newsletter listings afterwards. It's a nice podcast. He interviews a lot of folks around data science. A book would be, I haven't finished this book, but The Manager's Path, that was recommended to me at Evidation, and it's written by, I believe, a woman who rose through the ranks in tech, in management roles, and so she shares her blueprint for those sets of experiences. It's been very useful to understand how to talk to teammates and how to manage a team, different kinds of teams, different kinds of teammates. And then I know I'm going to remember something after this, as always happens. You're like, oh, yeah, I wish I'd said that.
Just let me know and I can put it in the show notes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Awesome. And then number 5, last but not least, if there was one piece of advice you'd give to your younger self, what would it be?
Oh, gosh. I had these questions ahead of time and I still didn't think of this one. Younger self, I would say, this is tough, but pay attention to your finances.
Sure.
That is a big one. I have an amazing spouse who is my coach financially. I've learned to appreciate that and find joy in managing those, but that has really affected my path. If I took out a lot of loans in grad school in my doctoral program, and I'm paying them back now. That has meant that I couldn't really pursue faculty roles because they wouldn't provide a high enough salary to pay the loans back. Industry does that. So it's closed doors to me in faculty and in government, right? Even though there are roles there that I really wanted. So that would be the advice.
No, that's a real consideration, and I feel like people definitely think about that and think about what you're trying to do with your public health career. Yeah, because it could be no joke. It could be no joke. That's for sure.
I feel like, especially in public health, if you have a mission or something, you're like, that's great. How are you going to pay for it?
Right.
Please think that through.
Right. Don't live in the same poverty that the people that you're trying to save with, because that does not improve your health either. So really think about how you can really improve your finances. And yeah, that's a whole other conversation. But Eric, this was a great conversation. I learned a lot today, and I'm glad that we were able to chat and chop it up a little bit. Looking forward to seeing where you end up, and look forward to future collaborations as well.
Thanks so much for having me, Omari. I am looking forward to where you take this show as well.
Well, thank you so much. Housekeeping items, everyone. Thank you all so much for watching or listening to this. Be sure to subscribe if you have not as yet. Leave a like if you're on YouTube. Leave a 5-star review and share this with a friend. Greatly appreciate you all. See you all next week. Peace, everyone.